days of remembrance of the victims of the Holocaust. Joining me now is author Douglas Wellman, who wrote A Teenage Girl in Auschwitz. Thank you for being with us. I appreciate your time. I want to start with the developing news today before we get into some of the misinformation surrounding anti-Semitism. But what's happening on colleges and university campuses? Most recently, Columbia is now canceling its large graduation ceremony. What message does that send about tolerance, hatred, and anti-Semitism in the country, bending to the protesters' demands?
The right to protest is part of our fundamental right to freedom of speech, but we don't have a right to violence. And this all has to be contained in a proper manner. So when I look at the protests on campus, my primary concern in life, Marnie, is truth. What is the truth? What do the protesters know from either side? Who's telling it to them? And is it the truth? And if what they're hearing is not the truth, then they simply become dupes of someone. So to disrupt, by the way, I used to be an assistant dean at the University of Southern California for 10 years, so I'm quite familiar with the college scene. And to disrupt the educational opportunities to other students and to cause violence on campus is completely unacceptable. And when they're allowed to get away with that, they will continue to do it.
And you discuss the dangers of propaganda and misinformation, and you draw some parallels between the Nazi era and today's media landscape. Can you give us some examples of that and why it is so dangerous?
Absolutely. In 1934, Adolf Hitler took control of all German media. The only message that the German people received was what the Nazis wanted them to receive. And I think for older Germans, this was something not quite so bad, but for younger Germans who had grown up in the propagandized school system, they had gone through the Hitler Youth and were constantly propagandized by the media. That was the only world they knew. All they knew was that what they heard from the media, and that part of that story was that the Jews were inhuman and unworthy of life. Well, what that leads to is in the book, A Teenage Girl in Auschwitz. 14-year-old Basha Anus is sent to the Auschwitz concentration camp. She's 14 years old. She was working with a German Jewish girl that was slightly older than her, and they're working moving rocks. The German girl, whose name was Hilda, saw something, and she said, "Oh, there's Heinz. I went to school with Heinz. I have to go say hello to him." And of course, her head was shaved. And so she ran off to see Heinz. And he said, Heinz, do you recognize me? And he said, "Yes, Hilda, I recognize you." And then he took his weapon and shot her to death because Heinz was a SS guard and had been so thoroughly propagandized by the media that his former friend now did no longer count as being a human being. That's the danger.
And how real is the threat that history, heaven forbid, repeats itself?
Well, it does it all the time. And that's one of my big concerns here is that I say that people who know history frequently have a window into the future. So we look at the situation after 1934 in Nazi Germany. All the media is controlled. People only hear what they're allowed to hear. Well, we have traditionally had multiple media outlets owned by multiple different organizations or people. And when I was a kid, we'd listen to one radio station, and if they had an editorial opinion, okay, turn to another station, they had a different opinion perhaps. Same thing with newspapers. There were multiple newspapers. But most of our media these days, I'm told about 80%, has been scooped up by corporations. And they appear to all have the same opinion. and control a multitude of outlets. So we're no longer in a situation where we can look at media outlet A and then compare it to media outlets B and C to see what what their opinion is. It's all the same opinion. And that's where the danger is. That takes us back to 1934 Germany.
And people find what they want to believe, and then they dig their heels in, whether it's true or false. It's highly concerning this time. We have to look at history as our guide so that it does not repeat itself. Douglas Wellman, author of A Teenage Girl in Auschwitz, worth checking out. Thank you for your time, sir.
Thank you so much.